Uh, so we go from the old constituency of this group to creating a new constituency mostly, but with some people who are still with us for continuity. People like Jill and Bill and Biff and et cetera. And John, who's out there someplace today. So today I could not be more excited. I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about the four of you. I've never met you in person, but I've read your resumes. I know who went to my old church. I know who went to Jerusalem recently. I know who was in a submarine, and I know. I know that Steve has 2 acres of land in Dallas that he has to take care of. So I know you all a little bit, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. And could you say some words about yourself, just to give us a little sense of your voice and your past and where you are today? Could we start with Lijo?
Hello. Yeah, I just made it in time back to Dubai. Anyway, I was in the first 24 years of my life, I was in the Indian Navy. I retired as a commander. I was operating Russian attack submarines.
Oh, wow.
I also headed the Navy's submarine division in the Naval Dockyard, Mumbai. Bombay fleet is the top one in Indian Navy. Thereafter, I was also heading the construction of the French submarines in Mazagon docks. After my retirement from the Navy, for the last 10 years, I was in social work with various NGOs. I think I would have worked with about 32 NGOs. And when I was working with the NGOs, I was also on the board of a pharma, food and nutrition company. They asked me to, after 4 years, they asked me whether I could step off the board and then become the CEO of Middle East and Africa. So about a year ago, I shifted to Dubai with family, and I'm heading the company's division for Middle East and Africa. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay. And you live in Kerala, India.
I am from Kerala, but having been in the Navy, I was moving around in various parts of the country.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Now based in Dubai.
Great.
I had one question for him.
Yeah, please.
And Lijo, in between all that wonderful service for your country, for the Navy, and for the 30+ NGOs, didn't you do some mountain climbing in there?
Yeah. I climbed Mount Everest in 2004 as part of the Navy's expedition. We climbed from the northern face, which is the Tibetan or the Chinese face, simply because we had never done it before, and the Indian Army had climbed from the south side. South would have been easier. Yeah. Anyway, that's about it. Yeah.
You're the first person we've ever had around here who climbed Mount Everest. That's great. Steve in Dallas, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Off mute, thanks.
Mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, good.
Good. I say good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this council. I'm originally from a very small town in Northeast Texas by the name of Henderson, Texas, which is in the Arklatex region of Texas, which is where Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas all sort of meet together. And they call that region the Arklatex for Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, the abbreviation for that, and Texas. I'm about 60 miles outside of Shreveport, Louisiana, about 45 miles from the Louisiana border. Graduated from Henderson High there in 1987, went to school at Texas A&M University, majored in political science and finance, I worked as a corporate banker in Houston, Texas for many years until God called me into the ministry. And that calling was very, very interesting. I started my work in Bastrop, Texas in 2009. So I've been out at this, finishing up my 15th year of community organizing type work. And I started this work when there was a teacher at the middle school in Bastrop that called all of the African-American students into the library and told them that they were the reason why the school failed the state assessment test. When I got wind of that, I called a community meeting, summoned and marshaled all of the parents, African-American parents, to a central place where we talked about that. And then we created a plan for how we would go about addressing that. We brought the media into the equation. Eventually, the principal decided to resign, or she was fired, or asked for a resignation, one of the ones. And then we organized the community to really be involved and force the local school board to initiate a diversity plan. While we were in the midst of that struggle, I had meetings with the local African American Ministerial Alliance, which is an organization of about 100 different churches in the Austin area. And I remember going to speak to them and ask them to come alongside us in the work that we were doing against Bastrop Independent School District. And that group of 100 ministers refused to help its own people. And I just remember being totally confused by that, not understanding why people who are leaders in the community would not come and assist their own people. And so being understandably upset about that right then and there, I told myself that I would spend the rest of my life equipping the African-American church to be more involved in civic affairs, community service, civil rights work, like they were back in the 1950s and 60s when Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference all came together to prosecute and go after the civil rights in this country and ultimately being successful. And since then, the African-American church has gone to sleep. And I believe that's one of the major reasons why we are starting to witness the rollback of the rights that we had so fought for back in the 1950s and the 1960s. So for 15 years, I've been working to strengthen the African-American church to get back in the ball game of pursuing civil rights and being leaders in the community under God like they used to, with the theology that really favors God being one who is there and that has a preference for the oppressed. So I'm in my 15th year of doing this work and had an opportunity to meet Jerry back in October, and we just kind of bonded, and in short order, he became my big brother, and we've been communicating. And yes, I got a chance to go to Israel with him a couple of months ago. It was a time of my life. And from there, we just started talking, and I'm here today, and I'm so thankful to be here, and hopefully I can help this organization grow into the future.
Great. Steve, thank you so much
Yes,
for
sir.
all you do and for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. How about Roger? Could you tell us something about yourself?
Sure. And let me just start by expressing my appreciation to all of you for joining. I was very humbled to be invited to be part of this group and to have the opportunity to learn more and hopefully contribute in some ways to the work of URI, which has been mentioned is more critical than ever. So I'll say a couple of things. I've had the privilege of having some incredible professional opportunities over the years. I won't really spend time on that in this context. But for me, a lot goes back to my upbringing. And so I was born and raised in the Chicago area, and I'm the child of immigrants from Japan who came over to the States in the 50s. And I always go back to them for a couple of reasons. One is I feel like so much of my life has been around trying to think about how they showed up in the world as the people that they were. And that's how I've tried to think about my life, both professionally and personally over the years, and the values that they imparted to my brother and me. Another couple things that I think are relevant in this particular context. My parents growing up in Japan were Shinto and Buddhist. And when they immigrated to Chicago, they joined an Episcopalian church in Chicago that had a Japanese American community at that time. And so that became a real centerpiece of their community, I believe because of the Japanese community and Japanese language services that they had, but they converted to Christianity at that point. And so I felt like I grew up with the real benefit of having a bicultural upbringing as well as a multi-faith upbringing in a way. So their faith really was expressed through the Episcopal Church during my childhood. But we certainly have many conversations about what it meant for them to be coming into that with Shinto and Buddhist upbringings. So I grew up as an Episcopalian. As Bill noted, I attended St. Columba's, had the great privilege of attending St. Columba's for a time when we were in DC. And for the past almost couple decades now, have been a member of the Congregational Church in Providence for a number of great reasons. The only thing I'll note professionally is that one of my 2 jobs ago, through my role at Brown University, I had the great pleasure of meeting Jerry. And so have had a number of great conversations with Jerry. And again, as he took on the role here and started learning about the work of URI, it was very exciting for me to hear about the role that URI has played and continues to play and envisions going forward. So a little bit of my background. And again, thanks very much for the invitation to join.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you for being here. Wonderful. David, you got a good night's sleep. So you got to be sharp today. But you sent me an email yesterday, which was such an email I couldn't even respond to. I just had to say, I'll read it again and again and get back to you. But you've been on quite a pilgrimage, and we'd love to hear some words from you.
Sure. Well, I grew up on a cattle ranch dairy farm in northern Alberta. And 40 years ago, in my 3rd year of university, I had the opportunity to attend the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And that's where Jerry and I met. So our journey together actually goes back 40 years, although our paths have intertwined at some points, but have followed very uniquely parallel pathways. That year actually really transformed who I am today and where I started. I was raised in a very staunchly Calvinistic, Kuyperian Calvinistic home, but never felt comfortable with it. I had way too many questions and very few answers. And the answers that were given were so doctrinal that they didn't seem to fit my spirituality. So I continued my own work on my own within studies and so forth. At the same time, decided not to go into the ministry, but follow my own spiritual journey. So I was able to do various different other types of professions. I was in finance for a while, but I also had this creative aspect about myself that I wanted to fulfill. And so over 25 years ago, I started a design firm after studying at the UC Berkeley again in design. And I had the great opportunity of designing interior designs for numerous people and creating what I call sacred space. I've always been a very spiritual person and continued to look at all different religions. But every time I continued to search, I was constantly being drawn back to Judaism. And when I finally approached my rabbi friend about it, she smiled and she said, you know, when Moses came down from the Mount of Sinai, there's a passage there where they say all the souls, if you interpret it from the Hebrew perspective or the Hebrew words, it actually means those souls that are present, but those souls that are to come as well. And she said, you were one of those, David. I know that. And I first thought, what does that really mean? And as we studied those for the year and a half we studied, I realized I was truly coming home to where my spirituality is, and that is in Judaism. And the other aspect was, for me, was to come back home to Israel. And I am in the process of making Aliyah during a very difficult time in Israel, but I'm really glad to be there, because the most important aspect that I have found is to be a listener and allow people to talk without judgment, without expressing your own point of view, but allowing them to speak their truths and where they are at, because that is all part of the healing process. So.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you,
That's
thank you, thank you.
Thank you, David.
And you live in two places?
At the moment, I'm in, still have a home in San Francisco. I did have a home for a while working from Vancouver, but now I'm making Tel Aviv my home. So,
Got it. Got it.
so I came back for this, for also for Circle of Light, and some other things that I need to accomplish as well before heading back again.
Great. Thank you, David, and welcome.
Interesting, man.
Thank you.
And Suzanne, hello. Good to see you. Elizabeth, hello. Welcome, welcome. Does anybody have any, having heard 4 people that you've never met before, anybody got any comments before we move on the agenda?
Guess not.
Welcome.
Welcome is it. Okay. Now in the agenda, we move to the executive director who is going to give us an update. Jerry.
Great, thanks. So welcome, everyone, and great to be here in San Francisco. A little echo. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if everyone else is on mute as well. Great. So I'm Jerry White, the executive director. If you can see me fine and hear me, I'm in San Francisco for a couple days. And glad to partake in the meeting in person here in San Francisco with some of our dear friends and founders. And yeah, really welcome. I'm so excited by the new blood and energy and diversity coming into the room. So, you know, David and Roger and Steve and Lijo, thank you. You know, I know it's taking a risk. You are awfully busy people in different parts of the universe, and your commitment to come and join forces on this team is super meaningful to all of us. So I'm just starting with a big thank you. And also thank you for those who also on the call who have been in the trenches during what has been a very busy year and a half. I think I'm 21 months or so, 22 months into the job, coming up on 2 years. And it's been a baptism by fire and water and joy and tension. And so URI is going through what I would call a really important transition as we reach for the stars, as we reach for what I call URI 3.0. And what I mean by that is just like we're in our 3rd decade, 3.0, and we're trying to modernize and refresh some of the vision that was part of the founding in the year 2000. So 25-year anniversary is this year. I'm very excited about that. And I came to URI as many of you know, because I was passionate about the vision and the people and the mission, that I thought that Bill Swing's vision of a grassroots network, not just top down, but a bottom up movement around the world of we, the interfaith people, working to solve problems, common problems in our backyards, was brilliant. And that we had to do our work coming up from Mother Earth that was being injured by religiously motivated violence, and with people and religious minorities who are injured and harmed by religiously motivated violence. So you all, I always repeat the purpose statement. One is for enduring interfaith cooperation. And that doesn't mean like we're like the rest of the interfaith groups. It means we value action more than just dialogue. So right now, in the area of growth, we have nearly 1,200 cooperation circles around the world in over 112 countries. And that's 25 years in. It's a miracle that these gardens of interfaith action are blooming all around the world. So that's good. And one of our pushes for URI 3.0 is to resume growth and accelerate growth. So we're having lots of conversations on how to make that happen, how to increase outreach to the next and rising generation, and how to multiply, perhaps be instead of 112 countries, by 2030, be in 130 countries. And instead of just 1,200 CCs, let's double that. Why aren't we pushing for 3,000 and 5,000? Not growth for growth's sake, just to count the numbers, but because we did a study on our impact, and it showed that interfaith work brought to communities increased a sense of belonging, community resilience, and visibility and confidence to do work together and to lead. So in a world that needs healing, having all of this peace army of interfaith warriors, so to speak, all around the world is very meaningful. And I believe we need to grow and accelerate that growth and the connectivity between the cooperation circles, the regions, and maybe the mother global office or mothership. So I think we're ready for that push. And already since I've been here at URI, all of the regions have resumed growth at faster levels than ever before. And every trip that I've had the privilege to make on behalf of URI to each of our 7 regions results in more and new CCs and new partnerships. So excited about growth. The other area that you'll hear me talk a lot about is focus. So again, not just growing for fun, but what's the focus? When I came in, there was what I'd call like energies going to 14 action areas, almost like the Sustainable Development Goals at the UN. So we were very active with our CCs around the world on a whole range of wonderful, creative interfaith gardens. But I thought that maybe we were missing this really beefy part of our mission that says we are dedicated to ending, not just observing or witnessing, to ending religiously motivated violence. And I think those are, ironically, fighting words. We have a lot to do. As you all know, religiously motivated violence is the fastest growing type of violence in the world. And even while URI has had a presence over the last 25 years, the trends are not in our favor. So we need to refocus our attentions on violence prevention. And that's why I brought in Karen Volker, our Director of Violence Prevention and Partnerships. Hi, Karen, who will be talking with us shortly about the focus needed to have a community-based approach to interrupting and stopping the spread of violence. It can be done. And we are making some exciting progress in exploring new partnerships that you will hear about shortly. So growth, focus, and the last buzzword you hear from me all the time is impact. How do we measure impact? We have all of these stories. Clearly the CCs, our partners, are having impact around the world, but we're able to tell the stories anecdotally. How do we capture them and show why interfaith matters and has impact? And in a world that is polarizing, how is it that we, the interfaith people, are ones of courage to stand together with religious minorities under siege and people who have been harmed and having no freedom or the opportunity to grow. So we stand in solidarity with all faiths and no faiths and spiritualities in this work, and we want to measure the impact. So I hired another director early on in my tenure, Ruben Shank, who became the director of learning and impact strategies. So his role is to look at appropriate metrics and how we are going to measure our progress in all of our purpose areas. So this is super important for us to grow, even to be fundable by foundations, for example, who are looking for what is our theory or theories of change and impact, and what is our plan of action going forward, and how will we know when we've succeeded? So those are my mantras that I share with you: growth, focus, and impact. And I think we're making some great progress. So it sounds like I'm congratulating myself as the new ED, but in fact, it's because of you all and because we have the largest grassroots interfaith network in the world with some of the most devoted staff. People have put in 10 to 20 plus years for this organization. And we have representatives from a URI Foundation managing the endowment and talent who are helping out. We have this group, the Senior Advisory Council, and we have 30 plus Global Council trustees. So this is quite a network around the world to corral, and it's because of the work of each and every one of you and the volunteers that we've been able to come this far. So I'm excited about that. Lastly, with Tom Hurley on the call, that maybe he can speak a little bit later. I'm not sure if it's on the agenda.
Yeah, it is.
That he'll talk about our approach to strategy and how we're looking for the next 5 years from 2025 to 2030 and are co-creating with all of you our strategy and impact for the future. So I'll stop there with thanks to Diana working. We'll hear about Circles of Light a little later, but just so you got a feel of where we're heading and what my priorities are, I'm super excited to be part of this team.
Before we move on, does anybody have any question or comment for Jerry? Having heard that.
Jerry, will you take a question?
Sure.
I'm really pleased that the assessment, I guess, has come to an end. I would be interested in sort of a quick hit. What happens next? One of the things that continues to strike me is how little we actually know about CCs. We know some things about CCs, but how they actually get work done and whether their work is effective is still kind of a blank check.
Huh. So I'd say there's two parts to that. The impact assessment we did with Bill's help in finding elite research and analytic and outside firm to look at our effectiveness and measure our CC impact was super important. So we were funded by Porticus to look at this. We completed the 3-year impact survey and assessment. And I think we learned quite a bit about ourselves internally. And it was important. It was rather risky to put the question, does interfaith even matter in all of these countries where we work? If the answer was no, we'd be closing our doors. So it's putting out there for other people to do the research on us. And the 80 to 90% of the respondents who were active in the field and responsive said yes when it comes to visibility, belonging, association, credibility, as well as learning leadership skills and confidence to take their work to the next level. So many of our CCs, as you know, started with 7 people and moved up past 700. They became really considerable nonprofit NGOs in the world. So I think, and then the second was, is the URI model of 3 different faiths, 7 different people, our little sort of DNA or our unit of growth, did that matter? Again, if we found out that it didn't, we'd be having to change everything in URI, that interfaith matters, but our whole model that we've invested in over 25 years was worth nothing. So the external validator said, no, it's worth something, and people would keep it. So these are, they're internal, but URI had never done it, as you know, Bill. And we learned a lot about ourselves, and I think a lot about the responsiveness of the CCs, which ones are active, which ones are sort of passive but exist, and which ones are most responsive, and what it means to actually grow. So we have the confidence to take what we learned and grow. The next phase, which is more important to me actually, because I already believed as we do, like that interfaith, I knew like interfaith does matter and the model was important, is actually to shift externally to say when it comes to our work through the CCs and partnerships, are we moving the dial on issues of community flourishing, issues of violence reduction, and issues of creating cultures or stimulating like peace, justice, and healing in the world. So that's sort of the new design, is looking at each of our purpose areas. And we've come up with like statement theories of change, which were recommended, and specific indicators of success to measure our external work, which is our true purpose. So we're on track, and we're moving to, and we're still learning about our CCs, not just from the past, but like what they're responsive to. And one of the things we've learned just in the last year that Karen Volker has been with us is by showing our CCs that there is an approach to violence that they can learn in their communities. It has triggered enormous appetite across from our Kigali, Rwanda meeting, as well as regional tests and exploration you'll hear from Karen about, that it showed like, oh, sign me up, as well as what our learning and training can do. So I think what's really big and new at URI is being able to measure the appetite and the growth in the area of reducing violence measurably. And I believe that URI will save, no one seems to believe me, I say millions of lives. So people are like, no, Jerry, you can't say that. So then I say, okay, hundreds of thousands, is that good enough for you? No, well, we aren't really sure because we've never really done it. And like, there's a sort of, well, what if I say thousands or 1,000 lives from religiously motivated violence? This is within our reach to do it at global scale, I'm convinced, and we will measure against that challenging vision and goal.
And we'll get to that in a minute with Karen too. Good. Thank you, Bill. Now we're going to look at circles of light, which is coming up. URI got started, and then after a while, somebody said, why don't we have a gala once a year to make some money for URI? So we started probably 10 years ago or 12 years ago, and then that's evolved, and it's made it through COVID, and now we're out the other side, and we have a great one coming up. And Diana, can you tell us about it?
Sure. So welcome everyone. Just wanted to invite you to what promises to be an immersive and amazing evening of music and inspiring stories and dance and drumming. Dr. Oscar Williams creating an amazing music entertainment evening interwoven with storytelling from URI. There will be 4 stories that will be accompanied by the music of Peebo Bryson and Regina Bell. If those 2 names don't ring a bell to you, just listen to the song A Whole New World was recorded and composed by Peebo Bryson, and both of them sang that duet and won the Grammy Award for that song. They are both Grammy Award winners beyond that, and amazing singers in so many ways. So we hope that you will be able to join us for this evening, and really are very enthusiastic. We'll be at SF Jazz, and which in itself is an amazing venue. And what is in it for you in terms of what happens that evening when you enter the doors? So you enter the doors, you will be met by music, by a glass of champagne or bubbly water, whichever one you prefer, and then invited to sit down at different locations in terms of seating arrangements. You will have a 2-course meal, which will be accompanied by music of either SF Jazz students and or the Bose Conservatory. So one way or another, immediately you will be immersed in music. You will be with your friends at the table, talking and all that. 7 o'clock comes rolling in. You will be invited into the auditorium, seated in the auditorium with all the other ticket holders, and the music starts. I am leaving it there because I'm going to say one thing. A lot of times we have these long, beautiful speeches from a lot of different people at our events. This evening will not be about speeches. It will be really about featuring music as well as highlighting 4 amazing stories from our regions. And the evening will conclude with desserts, dancing, and drumming, and you're invited to participate and partake in any aspect of that that you would love to do. Another aspect of the evening is we are looking at not just you coming with your friends, but you coming with the next generation. The 18-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, the ones that really are going to make a difference also as part of our, the world coming up. And we, as thank you, Jill, so much for everything that you do related to individual membership. We are going one step further in individual membership. We are going to be activating individual membership in collaboration with Karen Volker related to ending religiously motivated violence and creating a group of people that really are out there to address religiously motivated violence and hate speech. So that is something that we are going to be collaborating on, Karen and I, as well as the people that are joining URI as individual members at this level will be co-creating this campaign with us. This is not just us creating the campaign. It is really for all people involved to co-create alongside and involved and create a group of people that really are enthusiastic about the next steps of this organization. So if you know of anyone in high school, graduating high school, and who needs to be equipped in talking about how to address hate speech, how to address anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, currently on campuses right now, that is very high level, in the news right now, bring them along. We welcome them, and throughout the summer, Karen will be having different community sessions related to violence prevention and related to training of this nature. And we would welcome any individuals to join us at that level. So an evening of, yes, entertainment from Peebo and Regina Bell, yes, our inspiring stories, and further action looking at individual membership in the future and expanding on that level.
Great.
Anything else you would like to add?
Thanks, Diana. That was great. Enormous amounts of energy, creativity going to this. Just 2 comments. One is thank you, Steve, on the call today, and the new SAC member. He's the one who introduced us to Oscar Williams, that created this opportunity. So Steve's already started his work months ago and has added value from the get-go. So thank you, Oscar is amazing, and his pulling together a great program. And then the piece, maybe it's a detail about the outreach to youth, which is on one hand, we want you on the call, as well as other sort of foundation board members and SAC members to be keeping their eye on ticket sales. Who can you bring at the $100 and $50 level, where you're going to get food, booze, great entertainment? It's actually a great value ticket. And some people who are in a position to introduce or sell tables or split a table. I know that Barbara and Dylan are on that case. So some of us are trying to make sure that either $25,000 sponsorship or $12,500 is happening to fill tables and buy a certain number of tickets. So please press for that. That's important from the fundraising point of view. in the program point of view, as Diana said, in terms of appealing to youth, the question is on youth groups or anyone, the tickets go down to like $15. So if it's anyone who's like, under the age of 25 and actually like able to come with their parents, we love intergenerational, but we also love the allure for youth. So know that if you're buying more tickets, you can sponsor students to come at that cheaper rate at $15 a pop, which is a great deal. We want everyone to have some skin in the game, but the goal is that they emerge as new individual members of a rising generation of URI fans and workers. Great.
You should have all received in the mail, the invitation and also a postcard. Everything is on our website. So if you go to the uri.org website, immediately you will see the banner. You click on the banner and all the information is right there at your fingertips. And if you have any questions at all, you know how to reach me.
Thanks, Diana.
Good work.
And Oscar is a total gem to work with.
Oscar and I are very well acquainted. I drove from San Mateo last week and I picked him up in San Francisco and I drove him to Oakland and we did voiceover stuff. And then I drove him back in the traffic to San Francisco. And then and I have macular degeneration. I can't see on the highway. So it was an act of faith and very exciting.
And it worked.
And I'm here to tell the story. So Oscar and I, the waters parted for us, and he's really a great guy. And thank you, Steve, for the introduction. A couple of weeks ago, I heard Karen Volker tell about things that URI is doing in India and things that URI is doing in Africa, and I had never heard this before or anything like it. And I thought, wow, this is something that the SAC needs to hear about. So I invited Karen to brief us today on the kind of work that you've started there and what's the response and the response and the response. Karen, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I have a small presentation. I think pictures actually sort of convey a lot. So if you don't mind, I'm going to throw some slides up for you to just see a little bit of the action that's been going on around the country, around the world with respect to violence prevention. So, nope, not yet. I just have to get the, have to share my screen.
Karen, can you first describe just a teeny bit about your background and where you are, the newcomer?
Sure thing. Yeah, before I do that. So my name's Karen Volker, and I've been with URI for about 15, 16 months. I came to URI after a 26-year career at the State Department, where I was a U.S. diplomat posted overseas and in Washington. And then I spent 10 years working for an international nonprofit organization called Cure Violence Global. And it was at Cure Violence Global where I learned about this health approach and really became sort of committed to the scaling of this approach globally. And when Jerry approached me about bringing this approach to URI, and I learned what URI is, I thought, wow, this is a match made in heaven. So I can tell you more about exactly what the health approach is, because some of you haven't heard it, but I think what I'll do is offer to give you a separate briefing on the health approach and just use my time here to update you on the work we've done in the last 12 months since I really got my feet on the ground at URI. So let me share my screen and go into presentation mode. All right. So this is just a very quick update. Bill, it's going to actually include Honduras and some other things too, because since you and I met, we've done more. So
Okay.
the key updates, basically starting last year, my goal was to really introduce first and foremost the staff, the trustees, and the Senior Advisory Council to the health approach, and then take it out to the regional staff and then through them to the regions. And so we've been building up through various webinars and trainings, and now we have monthly community calls and then intermittent specific webinars or coaching sessions, which I'll tell you more about, that are on an ongoing basis. And that's really just all about pushing out the approach. We decided, though, and not even just decided, we were asked. When I presented on this in Kigali at the global meeting, a few of our staff members came up to me and said, I really want to bring this to my region. Could you come do a training in our region? And so that's what I'm going to brief you on here. So in November, I went to Jos, Nigeria, and I did a 2-day training on the health approach to violence prevention. And at this training, we trained 25 individuals from 15 CCs, cooperation circles, and partner organizations. And at the end of the 2-day session, they were given certificates that said, you know, that they had attended a violence prevention in Nigeria training. And they, to a person, demanded that they redo the certificates and say it's a certificate that they attended a training on the health approach to violence prevention. And this was because they felt it was so new and innovative and useful for their context that they didn't want just another, they'd all been trained in violence prevention in the past, and they felt that this approach brought something new and different that they could use in their communities. And then, unbeknownst to me, without any prompting from me, they developed a training program to be held March of this year. I found out about it about a week beforehand, so I had literally nothing to do with this. This was on their own accord. And they trained 70 faith leaders and actors, and they included government officials and other international organizations in the health approach to violence prevention. And so this was carried on the evening news in Nigeria, and it got a lot of publicity for URI. And it took this approach that we had trained these 25 individuals, all 25 of them, all the individuals wanted to participate and bring this training forward, but a couple of the CCs took the lead. And so they are now trying to figure out how they're going to continue spreading this throughout Nigeria and throughout West Africa. February of this year, so back in Kigali, we were approached by our West India coordinator, who was very concerned about the violence happening in Manipur. I don't know how much you've been focused on that, but there was a lot of violence that erupted in May of last year. So it was very much new and very much on this individual's mind at the time of our meeting in Kigali. And he said, I'd like to bring you to Kolkata to do a training on the health approach. Well, we went there, and at that training, we trained about 10 different people, but instead of making it just India and just West India focused, East India focused, it was our Asia director asked us to make it Asia focused, and he brought people from Sri Lanka also, and from all over India, not just East India. And so they took the health approach. And while we were there, we also, on the top right photo, met with a couple, both top right and bottom left are in our community visits that we did with cooperation circles and the members of the communities. And this top right picture I'm pointing out because I've just learned last week that that imam and the other Muslim members of the Muslim community that we met with would like to be trained in the health approach after having spent an afternoon hearing about it. And they are dealing with violence between Hindus and Muslims in their community. So I'm working with BSPDEV to bring that training to this group of people who are forming an organization and will actually join URI as a new CC. So here's just briefly some of the feedback we got from that India training. I'm not going to read all of the quotes. I can circulate this later and you can read it at that time, but the main point is it was found to be useful and innovative and appreciated. So the next steps with our Asia team is to train a cohort of trainers in Asia who can then take this throughout India and throughout Asia, and to develop a curriculum to be introduced into schools in India The latter is being led by Abraham, who many of you may know. He's been with URI for a very long time, maybe from the beginning, and has done a lot of work in schools and leads an initiative called A Billion Youth for Peace. And that particular curriculum development initiative is of interest to the UN Office on Genocide Prevention, as they're very intrigued with what we're trying to do there. And so that might be an opportunity to collaborate with the UN on something. The second thing we did in Kolkata was a workshop specifically with the 3 representatives of the 3 ethnic groups from Manipur, from this region where violence had erupted. So we had Métis, Kuki, and Naga representatives who all came together. Now, these people who are actively killing each other, and before they came, they did not want to even meet in the same room. So we had devised a whole way of dealing with that issue. And we started off the workshop by having them each tell us their version of what's causing the history, what is the history of the violence, and then listening to those stories from each one of them. So they all felt that they had been heard by our entire URI Asia team, and felt like they knew that we knew why they were there and what was their view about the violence. After that, we did a whole series of exercises. It was a 2-day workshop that combined this health approach to violence prevention with an approach developed by William Ury at the Harvard Project on Negotiation. That it was called the Third Side, but it's really about bringing the community into finding a solution. And in this case, we applied that finding the solution to stopping the violence. We walked them through a number of exercises that I won't, again, go into detail on this. I can answer questions if you like, but it took them into the future to imagine a time when peace had been accomplished. What did that look like? And they worked together on this, not separately. They identified key actors who would be useful for stopping the violence there in Manipur, so not like at a global level or national level, but really who was useful and important to contact in Manipur who could stop the violence. We walked them through some strategic empathy exercises, and then we created an influence map for who these people listen to and how to reach them. They created a list of confidence building measures that could be used to build confidence between the 3 groups in order to facilitate this reduction of violence. And they agreed on concrete steps that they could each take to try to reach these individuals who could stop the violence. So this was different from just a training on the health approach. Then the next thing in April of this year, together with our partner from Cure Violence, Maria and Larissa and Lupe, who's in the bottom left there, all went to Honduras and trained, I guess it was about 35 people. All of them were our practitioners who work with young women and girls who are themselves victims of violence or come from communities where there are high levels of violence. And this is a program that was funded by a donation that we received from an individual donor named Jessica Sarowitz. And the next thing that we're going to do on this is to actually do a training on male masculinity and how it contributes to gender-based violence. And that will be at a school in Tegucigalpa, a boys' school that our local partner organization also works with. And then we're also, through this project, organizing a gathering of Indigenous elders and youth to talk about the issues that they face, but specifically violence that the Indigenous community faces. And 2 of our Indigenous council members have requested to be trained in the health approach so that they can then take it to that gathering when they meet in July. So this was, again, some of the feedback that we received from the Honduras training. I'll send this around afterwards, or I'll have Diana send it. So looking ahead, we've confirmed our monthly violence prevention community calls. We're continuing to work with the Manipur group to help support them and keep them motivated and keep them moving forward. working with, Ruben is actually working with Abraham on the development of the violence prevention curriculum to be introduced into schools. I told you about the workshop on male masculinity. And coming out of the India training, our Sri Lanka coordinator and two of the participants from Sri Lanka have decided to take the health approach training and give it in Sri Lanka starting in June. And the first training will be in the central province of Sri Lanka with 40, and I was told this morning, 40 to 50 individuals from 5 cooperation circles. And then they're going to take this to 3 other provinces in Sri Lanka. So they are committed to taking this to all of Sri Lanka. And so we are supporting them in that and adapting these materials and answering their questions as they take this on to share with people in their communities. The things that are not yet confirmed that we have on our back burner or front burner, the launch of this global campaign to heal violence that was mentioned already. We're hoping to do a regional training for the 13 countries in West Africa because there's been a great demand for it after people heard about the training in Nigeria. I mentioned the Train the Trainer program in India, the Indigenous representative training that in Honduras, and then we're working with our MENA coordinator on a regional training for cooperation circles that will focus on violence reduction and exploring possibility of work with cooperation circles in both the UK and in Spain. Actually, the Spain one of our CCs just gave a presentation on URI and the health approach at the Catalonia Parliament of Religions this past weekend. And in the UK, I'm meeting with them on Friday to talk to them about, there's a group of CCs who want to talk to us about how can they build a program to scale this approach and take it to all of the UK. So we're just going to have a session with them to discuss that. And one thing I even forgot to put on the slide here is that as a result of one of our violence prevention community calls, there's a CC in Cameroon that is interested in being trained individually in the health approach. They have focal points throughout the whole country that they work with. And so we're training all of their focal points on Friday in the health approach so that they can begin to integrate this into the work that they're doing in the communities. So every place that we go, it seems that there's a great enthusiasm and it really kind of catches on fire and takes off sometimes in directions that we can't even anticipate. So that's my presentation. It was a lot. I speak fast. I apologize for that. But I'm able to answer any questions either now or at another time.
Great. Way to go, Karen. My goodness.
Thank you, Karen.
There are 2 people here from the Asia Foundation, Bill Fuller and Susan Siskel. Do you have, Susan, do you have any, Suzanne, do you have any comment, or Bill, do you have any question or anything?
Suzanne, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm a little brain dead. I just got back from China. No, I'd like to know more actually about the training, maybe not in this session, but you know, it sounds really promising, and I'd be really interested, given that the Asia Foundation does a lot of work on, especially work on stopping violence towards women and girls. And we do a lot of research on peace building and on understanding the dimensions of conflict. So very exciting, Karen. I'd really love to learn a lot more.
Perfect.
Good. Thank you, Suzanne. Bill?
Karen, I listened to the hour and 25 minutes of your strategic and gang planning session that occurred when I was off some other place. It's fantastic. It is really good work, and I like the way that you're approaching this. One question that I think is going to come up. Training is terrific, I think. But the question is, if the context in which people will have to apply training later on is really bad, do we need to be worried more about the context as well as training? For example, if you have a wretched authoritarian regime, or you have weak laws and weak enforcement, or you have levels of discrimination that run through society. There are many other aspects of the context, some of which are cultural. So I'd be interested in sort of how you conceive of that, how we might take that into account.
Mhm. Thank you for that. So the way we take it into account, Bill, is to look at the whole problem, right? Violence, it happens, but before it happens, there are things that contribute to it, right? And after it happens, there are people who are affected by that violence, either trauma, the suffering that they experience, what have you. So URI is perfectly organized and set up to be able to deal across this entire spectrum, because it has cooperation circles that work in all these 14 action areas. So if it's a place where you have, and then the other thing I'll say real quick before I move on is that because we have a local grassroots organizations, everybody who we train, all these cooperation circles, are very well placed to understand the context and adapt it and apply it to the local context and to whatever type of violence that they want to address or that they need to address. And so that's why the health approach, I think, is so good, because it's community-based, highly adaptable, and applicable in lots of different kinds of violence. And that's exactly the kind of coaching sessions that I'm having with different CCs and with the Sri Lanka group, for example, is to help them think through that application and that adaptation. So the other thing that I'll say here is that, so on the precursors to violence, and it may be that there are some of the kinds of things you mentioned. It may be that there's structural violence, or there may be a dictatorial regime that's contributing to the violence, or what have you. Some of our CCs might be well placed to work in that area, others may not, right? So what we have to do is figure out where can we intervene, and we being that local partner, not me, not anyone in this room, right? But help them see where they can intervene effectively and start there, right? We can't do everything everywhere, but every place where there's violence, I would bet that there's something that a local URI partner could do something about it, right? And we can help them think that through and figure out where's the entry point for them.
Good.
That's
Good. Bob, did you have your hand up?
Yes. Karen, this sounds powerful. It sounds attractive. It sounds actionable. It just sounds marvelous that there's a program that we can actively get behind and promote. And I apologize for the question, but could you give me a 2 minutes on what the health approach to violence prevention is?
Absolutely. I've got like even a 30-second version for you. So
Great.
the health approach looks at violence as a behavior that can be prevented and which acts or spreads in a contagious manner, right? So it's about a bad behavior, not about bad people. So it immediately takes it out of the rule of law framework where most people have placed it for decades and places it into this other more health framework that allows you to address violence from a more holistic manner, right? It focuses on the importance of preventing violence. So, and because violence is contagious, and that's not just me saying that, there are studies that demonstrate this, dozens of studies that demonstrate the contagiousness of violence, the ways in which it's contagious, between types of violence, between individuals, and intergenerational. So this is the health approach in a nutshell. And then there's a way to deal with it that is based on the same approach the World Health Organization uses to interrupt and stop the spread of a contagious disease. So the World Health Organization's approach is to detect and interrupt. So detect where the virus is and then try to stop it from spreading. Change the behavior of the highest risk. So who are the people who are getting this virus? What are their behaviors that are contributing to them getting this virus? And how do we change those behaviors? And then what are the norms that are contributing to the spread of this violence? And how do we address those norms? So those are the three main components. And we apply them in the case of violence, anticipate and prevent violence. And again, here's where I think, especially in the context of religiously motivated violence, a global grassroots interfaith network is perfect for this. We have interfaith groups at a very local level in places where there's religiously motivated violence, who know each other and probably know each other for dozens of years, who can talk to each other when they can anticipate that violence might happen and get ahead of it and stop it from happening. So we're asking them to do that, right? To think about when violence might happen and use your influence with other people that you know in the community to try to prevent that from happening. So
Okay,
it's
he
just
was saying, he was saying a 2-minute explanation. You said you could do it in 30 seconds.
I'm sorry, Bill. Thank you.
You did and you didn't. Okay.
Happy to meet anybody another time and talk about it.
Okay, other comments, but this is so important to get. Do I see any hands? Yes, Steve, yeah.
Are there places in the United States to deploy this?
Absolutely. It's being deployed, Steve, by Cure Violence Global in a lot of communities in the United States. And there are a lot of other organizations that are also using the health approach. They may call it something else. It's so I can connect you with the right people over at Cure Violence. And I believe it's something that we could even do more of within URI in terms of getting faith communities engaged.
Good, good. Any other comment? Okay, if not, Karen, thank you so much. This is the first time we've had any kind of report like that ever, and it was, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I will leave you now, and thank you so much.
Okay, we'll be talking.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, let me know what I can do. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Now we turn to Tom Hurley, who we're sitting in the Presidio in 2024, working on URI, and he was in the Presidio in 1998 working on URI, almost where we're sitting now. And today he's come full circle, and he has 2 things to work with us on today. Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Bill. As Bill just said, I was living in San Francisco and was engaged on the consulting side during the foundation of URI, and was inspired by the organization and the vision at its heart and the organizational concept of creating and connecting these cooperation circles around the world then. And I'm still excited by what's unfolded in the last 25 years and even more by where URI can go from here. So I was invited to come back and support URI last fall. And I've been engaged in a number of ways, and most recently I've been working with the leadership to design and guide an expedited strategy process. And I want to tell you a little about that process and where we are. And then, as we just did with Karen, I really want to open it up and invite your questions, but also your big picture thoughts on where you'd like to see URI go, so we can integrate those in our collective thinking moving forward. And as Karen did, I'd like to briefly share a few PowerPoint slides just to stay focused in my description of the process and where we are. Those of you who have been part of the SAC and have been in any of the last 2 or 3 meetings have heard some of this, but I'm going to start at the beginning for those of you who are new. There are 3 primary objectives that we have in this process. The first is the obvious one, to provide strategic guidance for URI's leadership. And when I say leadership here, I mean not just the staff leadership, which Jerry and the senior directors on staff provide, but I mean leadership from the trustees, from the Global Council, and also leadership from you all, who are members of the Senior Advisory Council, as well as those who are part of the URI Foundation board. URI is distinctive in many ways by being a truly multi-stakeholder organization where all of these groups, the staff, the trustees, the advisory circles, have really, as well as obviously the cooperation circles and all of the groups operating at a regional level, and partners have important and essential roles to play. So first purpose, provide strategic guidance for that group. Secondly, to conduct the process in a way that we very intentionally are encouraging and enabling constructive collaboration among all of these stakeholders. As all of you who have been involved in global organizations or any organization that reaches a certain degree of complexity, there tends to be a silo effect that naturally occurs with different parts of the organization operating more independently, not connecting as fully as they might, and with different parts of the organization not knowing what other parts are doing. We want to work, again, very consciously and intentionally through this process and in an ongoing way to ensure that all of the key stakeholders and the people and the groups that are committed to URI's purpose are connected with one another, share a common vision, and are able to not only bring forth, but to manifest a collective wisdom in service of that shared purpose, which leads to the third objective for the process, which is coming out of the expedited part of this strategy development work, which takes place in the summer, to put some processes and practices in place that will ensure ongoing connection, conversation, collaboration across these different groups and across levels, as Jerry was saying at the beginning, from the grassroots level where the CCs are active to the regional levels and to the global level. We have three priority areas of focus. The first is optimizing cooperation circle network growth and connectivity. The second is developing URI's learning in action ecosystem and seed funding initiative. And the third is launching a global interfaith campaign to heal violence. And you just heard from Karen about the work currently going on in regard to that. I think these three areas of focus are all really crucial and important to explore together as URI moves into its second quarter century of life. Because the first one, optimizing network growth and connectivity, is all about, first and foremost, as Jerry said at the beginning, really inspiring a growth in the number of CCs and simultaneously ensuring that there is rich opportunities for connection and cross-pollination among them, not only at the local grassroots level, but at the regional level as well, and then cross-regionally in a global sense. The second, and of course, that network is what differentiates URI from any other global interfaith or peace-building organization in the world. And so it's essential that URI continue to develop and grow the capacity of its people and members in the network. The second area of focus, the learning in action ecosystem, by which we mean a technology platform that can deliver world-class learning opportunities and program offerings to the network, as well as the team of global staff and regional staff who are developing those offerings and eliciting them from the membership to be shared within the network, constitutes the way that the network is both nurtured and enabled by offerings from the global level, but also creates the platform in which members of the network can be sharing resources with each other, can be learning from each other, and building collaborative opportunities with one another. The seed funding initiative concept is one in which URI really seeks to take what it's been doing at a small level in terms of seeding innovative initiatives in different regions and take that to a whole other level in ways that are aligned with the strategic direction that emerges from this work and with the and adapted regionally. Launching the global interfaith campaign to heal violence. Again, you just heard a lot from Karen about what's already being done. So what we're exploring in this strategy process is, what does that look like if it were taken to the next level? And if there was a concerted campaign, as Jerry mentioned, with individuals as well as with URI's cooperation circles and partners, and done in a coordinated, collaborative way globally, with a focus on the areas where URI has a strong presence and where there's both need and receptivity, as Karen was highlighting, and which came out in some of your questions. And so while the first area of focus is all about the network, which really constitutes the heart and soul of URI and which differentiates it from other organizations in this field. And the second area, which is all about the programming and the sharing of resources and funding of initiatives. This third area is about taking all of those assets, if I can call them that, and exploring how does URI, as this multi-stakeholder, multi-level organization, bring all of that to bear on one of the really crucial issues of our time globally, namely ending religious violence. So those are our areas of focus. Very briefly, we launched this process in April. We'll complete this part of the process in September, when the Global Council will meet and review a strategic framework, which will be developed, and we anticipate approve it. To get there, we are in phase 2 right now, where for each of those 3 areas I just described, we have 3 multi-stakeholder dialogues planned in successive weeks, one of which is what we're calling a global town hall, involving all trustees, all staff, all advisors, and some of the leaders, especially young leaders and indigenous leaders from the CCs themselves, in conversation about each of the areas. We've just completed our 3rd dialogue on the first area of focus, optimizing network growth and connectivity. And a week from next Tuesday, we will begin our 3-week series of dialogues on developing the learning and action ecosystem. As you can see, there are 2 global council meetings that are part of this as well. At the end of phase 2, we'll move into phase 3, in which the working groups, collaborative working groups involving trustees, staff, and advisors that are responsible for framing and providing background material on each of the 3 areas of focus. They will draft strategic initiatives, proposed strategic initiatives in each of those areas. We will then take those proposals out to the regions. We will take them to the CCs and invite both feedback and adaptation to ensure that they are responsive to the realities and context of each region. And then in August, we'll pull it together in an integrated document, which, as I said, we'll present to the global Global Council. So the SAC meeting here today is occurring, as I said, just at the end of our first series of dialogues. Some of you have been part of our multi-stakeholder dialogues in the first town hall. If any of you and all of you have a standing invitation to all of the global town halls, if any of you want to be part of the other dialogues that are taking place, we would love to have you, and I'll be sure that you receive an invitation for those. I think rather than talk more about the process, I think I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer questions if there are questions about the process. But as I said in my introduction, what I'd really like to do is open it up. A number of you have been involved in different conversations, as well as many one-on-ones with me. I'd love to hear the reflections on the process to date from any of you who have been involved. And I'd also love to hear any kind of big picture ideas that any of you have been nurturing for URI for a while that you don't see being part of the URI agenda at this point. And Bill Fuller, if you don't mind me using you as an example here, I had a wonderful conversation with Bill a couple of weeks ago, and he was sharing with me his vision for URI in addition to what it's doing with its cooperation circles and partners, taking on a new initiative or developing a new initiative to connect with religious leaders of major religious and spiritual traditions and communities around the world, and then working at that level and allying that, connecting that work with what it's doing with cooperation circles to take its impact in the world to another level. So if any of you, as I say, are harboring ideas, possibilities that you think URI should be exploring as part of this process, this is an opportunity to share them. And of course, you can always share them in the dialogues or in conversation with me. So I will stop there. As I say, I would love to hear reflections from those of you who have been involved in the process, or anything else that you think we should be exploring.
Barbara, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you've been involved in this. Do you have any feedback?
Let's see, what would be most constructive for this group here? I guess my reflection would be the feedback, the response was immediate across all stakeholder groups. So stakeholder groups in URI being Global Council, our trustees, representing the CCs around the world. That's an elected body that really runs our strategic decision-making to date. Our Global Council, our global staff in the office, this body, the SAC. So across all stakeholders, the response of the opportunity to come together and not be siloed and share ideas was overwhelmingly positive. So we're clearly stepping into new turf by Tom bringing us all together in collective dialogue, and that's being really well received. And the other thing I would say is that so we were the first group to go. We had no time. We were the CC Networking and Growth Committee. We had literally 48 hours to come up with whatever we're going to come up with to present. We did it. We pulled it off. And the feedback that we're getting from this collective process is phenomenally creative. I mean, it's already clear that the kind of ideas that we're getting, the thinking around it, the creativity of ideas, synthesis of ideas is profoundly effective. So our next step as a group, now we've had multiple meetings where we've gotten input And our next step now is to begin to codify this input into a proposal, or in Tom's words, an initiative. From what I can see, we have got the data, we've got great data to work with, great feedback to work with. So I'm confident in our ability to come up with an initiative that, again, we'll get feedback on, and finally shape into something that hopefully is both impactful for URI relative to our mission, and also feasible relative to funding our limited resources and staff. We're going to have to hone in and prioritize based on what's both impactful and doable. So it's an incredible process. I don't know how Tom is managing something this big and complex. I mean, he really put both of his long arms around this thing and created something that's big enough to include everybody, and yet tight enough to be manageable for him anyway, to manage. Not everybody could manage it, but that's my feedback. It's a very, very exciting to be part of it.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Tom, we're kind of in your hands here.
Good, good. I want to build on what Barbara was saying about the work. When she refers to her group, she's talking about the CC Network Growth and Connectivity Group, and she's one of the lead trustees on that group. Let's see. Poulin is one of who's also here, is one of the lead trustees on the Learning in Action Ecosystem Group. And to Jerry's point earlier about focus, which I think is really, really important, when I say that in July, each of the work groups will deliver a proposal regarding a strategic initiative in each of these areas, part of what's intended there is, rather than us coming up with a list of 5 things to do related to network growth and another 5 things related to network connectivity, and the same with the ecosystem and healing violence, for each of the groups to think really deeply and creatively about how to design an approach for URI to take, again, which leverages its CCs, which leverages its partners, which works from every level, from the global to the regional to the local, and does so in a way that, with a single approach, in a sense, simultaneously generates growth on the one hand, say, while also fostering connectivity and cross-pollination and a sense of belonging to the network and so forth. So that we end this process with just a very few key things that URI is committed to doing and investing its resources in over the next several years. Recognizing, of course, that all the CCs will continue to be doing the work they are doing day by day, week by week. And so, again, part of what distinguishes URI is this blend of globally driven, regionally adapted work with all of the incredibly creative, important bottom-up, grassroots oriented work that's occurring all the time. So I'll stop. Topher.
Yeah, I think, what's exciting is to hear that everybody's communicating with each other, learning from each other, breaking down whatever, walls or misperceptions or whatever that may be. That's fantastic. So bravo to you. I think, just my 2 comments are, accountability or effectiveness, both 2 separate items, measuring effectiveness, Jerry, brilliantly said, I think we save millions of lives. Okay. How do we actually, put that into a data backed, program? Because the 2 things that I always stand behind are our brand and our sustainability as a organization, right? So sustainability comes from funding, and funding comes from effectiveness and impact. And so that's why I always kind of fall on that sword. And then the brand to me is really, I think ultimately what connected us all to the organization, which is this concept of, religious motivated violence. And, we run a fine line between preventing violence at a local level, let's say in a family environment, that may be misogynistic, maybe culturally local, versus religiously motivated. Like, I am hurting you because you are a Jew and I am a Muslim, or vice versa. And so the idea of staying on brand and being able to show that we somehow, some way, are enlightening, humanity, that we may have different religious beliefs, but we're all human beings living on this tiny little orb in the middle of a universe that somehow we need to sustain, with a diversity of beliefs and cultural and background. So I think that the piece that's kind of those two pieces to me are absolutely critical. And I hope that they are, what's the word for it, prioritized in part of this process as we continue to grow and develop.
Yeah, all excellent points, Topher. I'll just briefly say that with regard to the effectiveness, you referred back to what Jerry had said earlier, and how to measure, the effect and impact of what's being proposed in these initiatives is part of what will be articulated. And then with regard to your comments about brand, which are very interesting, there is another consultant working with URI on a somewhat parallel and somewhat connected track having to do with communications and branding. So there's a very systematic effort to focus on that topic, which Jerry can share more about. Love to hear other reflections. Yeah.
Good.
Maybe from some of the new folk or who haven't, what resonates with you, but also Poulin and Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I haven't hearing from you all, what's striking you.
I can jump in. I just want to really echo that. I've been involved with strategic processes like this over much of my career. The first half of my career was with McKinsey, and I think something I believe very strongly is that it is important to get to the right answer, but it's just as important to view a strategic process as an alignment building thing. And in an organization as diverse and heterogeneous as we are, the ability to get us around the same table, talking through difficult issues and making everyone feel heard is going to be critical to us coming out of this as one URI, ready to go after whatever the strategic recommendations are as a united body. And so Tom is leading us expertly, and this process of coming together and for everyone to feel heard has been critical, I think, to setting the stage for us to come together across all of our diverse bodies, but even within our bodies to all align on the direction forward, and it's invaluable.
Bob Coleman, ordinarily I don't like to put people on the spot, but you were in the first global town hall. I wonder if you have any reflections you'd be willing to share with the group.
I think it's a wonderful idea to get people together just to communicate that we are working together. I don't have any major conclusions from it, but I know I'll attend all the others going forward. It's useful to do that. We have to hear from Jerry all the time, and we have to recommit to the fact that we're all working hard together.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Bob. Other comments or big ideas? I'm delighted to see Steve and Lee Jo and maybe we've already lost a couple people. But the new members, David, and would love, as this moves forward, to have a chance to talk with each of you, bring you up to speed, and invite your ideas into this process. There's, as all of you know, both because it's human nature and because of the way organizations function, we tend to sometimes find ourselves less creative than we might be because we don't question some of the assumptions, that have become part of the DNA of the organization. So new people looking afresh as you just step in can be really helpful. So love to get your ideas, and in your own work, I can tell from having listened to your introductions, you probably have a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom that can inform us very usefully. Good. Well, Bill, we may have heard all we're going to hear from the group.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'll pass it back to you.
Good. What's that, Jerry?
I was wondering if David, were you about to speak?
I thank you, Tom. I'm very interested in what you, and I would love to sit down and talk with you about it, especially now being in the Middle East and hearing stories and working through the trauma on both sides that is there. So this is a really, really important work.
Yeah, good. Thank you, David.
Plus
Look forward to the conversation.
Plus, at the same time, I think it's really important that we always have a contrarian viewpoint in every sort of organization. So, which kind of rounds the thing up, something that Golda Meir always did, having a contrarian. So, thank you.
Tom, thank you so much. You have been and are and will be a blessing to URI in great depth. And so thank you for today and for all the days.
Of course, Bill. Thank you.
We're heading down to the end of this meeting. Officially, what'll happen is that the 4 people who came today will take your names to the Global Council, and they will affirm those names. But Frida Bansal, who's the chair of the Global Council, says she thinks that we ought to get rid of going to the Global Council, and that the Senior Advisory Council, if they have their own people, if they want their own people, they could just have them. They don't need to have approval from the Global Council. But for right now, we need approval. So we'll take so that's one thing. Another thing is that we have 4 new people today. When we get together on September the 18th, I think, we want to have 5 more new members. And when we get together on December the 3rd, we want to have 4 or 5 new members. So that when we turn the calendar this year, the SAC is a new committee of URI. So if anybody has names of people that you would like to bring in, let me know, and we'll go after them. I want to say to the 4 people who came on, URI is not only an organization, but it is an organism. And D. Hawk said to me, Bill, you'll go to bed at night and you wake up in the next morning and URI will have grown. Not because you did anything, because it grows itself. It's an organism, which is a romantic idea, but also it means that there's an awful lot of continual learning that has to go on in order to get your arms around this thing. An organization, you can just look at the chart, you got it. An organism, you got to keep your ear down to the ground and listen very carefully to see how it grew over the night when you weren't paying any attention. We got a lot of things. This is URI is a 99% volunteer organization. It's probably 99.99. So we're all in this together as volunteers. We're looking for, we're looking for linkages. You can link us to things that we heretofore haven't been able to even approach. We're looking to you as a person. This is a highly personable organization. We're not looking for just professional categories. We're looking for human beings. Because at the end of the day, it's the humanity. And bringing your humanity to this is something. You all also have experiences that we don't have. And we need to hear about your experiences for us to grow. We need to fund this thing. I've learned that international interfaith organizations exist on funding. If you have funding, you do it. And if you don't have funding, you talk. And there are a lot of talking organizations out there. We're a doing organization. And the other thing I want to say is it takes a long time to learn about URI. People come in and say, yeah, I got it. You know, I read the charter. I read the newsletter. I think I got it. You don't get it. Honestly, you can get it, but it takes a long time to really get a feel for it. So if it seems a little odd to you right now, it's okay. Because it takes maybe a while to get not only your brain around it, but to get your heart and your instincts around it. So we had a 2-hour meeting. We got 2 minutes to go, and I think we're going to end up short. Does anybody have anything to say before we got 2 minutes? So be short. Does anybody have anything to say? Lee Joe, do you have anything to say at the end of the day?
No, nothing specific. Whatever I have, whenever I've had doubts, I've clarified with you, I think, with you and Jerry. So I'm okay. I'm just imbibing right now.
Okay, great. David, anything?
I just want to thank you all for inviting me to be part of this team. I am looking forward to working with Jerry again. This is an incredible journey for both Jerry and I. And that fateful day that he went through was also a fateful day for me as well, because we were both supposed to attend that camping trip together. I stayed home. Jerry went. So
Yeah. Wow.
So.
And Steve, do you have a last minute comment before we quit?
No, sir, nothing from me today. I'd just like to thank you guys for inviting me to sit on this prestigious committee. I'm going to enjoy it. And today I was just sitting back and just learning and taking everything.
Terrific. Well, welcome all, and we'll see you on September the 18th. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.
Bye.
Thanks again, Tom.
Thank you, Diana.
Mm.
Boom.